My name is Claire Bennett. I am 33 years old. There are betrayals that arrive without raised voices or slammed doors. They come folded inside old envelopes you forgot you kept, or in short emails from people who finally decide they can no longer stay quiet. If you have ever watched the people closest to you rewrite the record of your own life while you were still in the room, you will understand why I stopped expecting loyalty to announce itself. It was a Tuesday in early spring when the first piece surfaced. I was at the kitchen table in my townhouse, the one I rented on the lower slope of the Oakland Hills, just below the exclusive villa community where my family's property sat. The light through the window was flat and ordinary. I had pulled out an old accordion file to find receipts for a roof repair I had paid for myself 3 years earlier. An envelope I did not remember slid out from between two folders. Inside was a copy of a trust amendment dated 2 years back. My name had been removed as co trustee. The signature beside the removal looked like mine, but the date fell on a week I had been in Sacramento for a grant writing conference. I had never signed it. I set the paper on the table and did not move for several minutes. Then I opened my laptop and checked the old shared drive I still had access to. The withdrawal history showed repeated transfers to an account in my older sister's name labeled as maintenance and legal fees. The total was larger than every contribution I had made in the previous year and a half combined. A new email appeared while I was still looking at the numbers. The sender was Thomas Reed, the attorney who had drafted the original trust documents when my father was alive. The message was brief. Claire, I should not be sending this, but you need to see the full activity log. They told me you had stepped back willingly. I kept copies. Call me when you can. I read it twice. Then I closed the laptop, washed the single mug in the sink, and sat back down. I created a new folder on my desktop and began saving copies of every statement and email I could still reach. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I simply started building a record. 2 days later, I met Thomas Reed at a small coffee shop 2 towns over. He brought a thicker file. Inside were emails between my mother and my older sister discussing how to present the changes to me. One line from my mother read, "She will push back at first, but she always gives in when we frame it as protecting her from stress. She has always been the sensitive one." Another from my older sister said the removal would let them move faster on the improvements without Claire's delays. Thomas said they had assured him I was aware and had agreed to step aside because the pressure was too much for me. I asked him to keep our meeting between us for now. He nodded. On the drive home, I stopped at an electronics store and bought a small digital recorder. I tested it in the car with the radio on low. The sound was clear enough. That evening, my mother called. My older sister was on the line as well. My mother said they needed me to come to the villa on Saturday to sign updated paperwork the bank was requesting. My older sister added that it was just routine trustee updates and that I should not make it complicated because she had already done most of the work. My mother said, "Claire, you know how you get when there is too much at once. Your sister and I have been handling everything, so you would not have to." I kept my voice even. "Send me the documents first. I will review them before I sign anything." There was a short silence. My mother said, "We already told the bank you would be there. Do not turn this into something it is not." I said I would look at whatever they sent and ended the call. I placed the recorder on the table in front of me and pressed record on a test file. My own voice came back steady and flat test. Tuesday, 7:12 p.m. I saved the file, labeled it with the date, and put the recorder in the drawer of the small desk in my living room. Then I opened the folder I had started on my laptop and added a new note with the time and content of the call. I did not feel anger in the way people expect. I felt the same quiet click I had felt when I first saw the amendment. Something that had been locked was now open, and I was the only one who knew it. Over the next 2 days, I went through every old file I still possessed. I found copies of checks I had written for HOA fees and emergency repairs when the maintenance account had run low. I found emails from years earlier where my mother had asked me to just handle it this time because my older sister was busy launching her own projects. I had always said yes. I had told myself that keeping the villa standing was the last concrete thing I could do for my father's memory. I had never asked for my name on any of it. I had never expected thanks. I had only expected that the people who shared that memory would not erase me from it while I was still paying the bills. On Friday afternoon, another email arrived from Thomas Reed. This one had no subject. It contained a single scanned page, an earlier draft of the amendment, with a note in my mother's handwriting in the margin removed, Claire first. She will agree, once we explain, it is for her own good. The date on the note was 3 weeks before the version I had found in the envelope. I printed the page, placed it in the folder with the rest, and closed the laptop. I did not call Thomas back. I did not call my mother or my older sister. I sat at the table until the light changed and the room grew dim. Then I stood, walked to the drawer, and took out the recorder. I checked that it was charged. I put it in my bag along with the folder. Saturday morning, I would drive up to the villa. I would listen. I would record. I would not argue. I would not raise my voice. I would simply collect whatever else they were willing to say in front of me now that they believed I had already accepted the story they had written. That was the plan. It was not dramatic. It was not emotional. It was only what came next after the papers and the emails had already told me the truth. Saturday morning arrived exactly as I had expected. I drove up the winding road with the recorder in my bag and the growing folder on the passenger seat. I parked in the gravel pull-off below the villa rather than in the main drive. The air was cool and still. I left the engine running for a moment, checked that the recorder was charged, and then walked the rest of the way on foot. My mother and my older sister were already at the long dining table when I stepped inside. Papers were spread across the surface in neat stacks. My mother gestured to an empty chair without standing. My older sister did not look up from the document she was highlighting. I placed the recorder on the table between us before I sat down and turned it on without comment. Neither of them asked what it was. My mother slid a set of pages toward me. These are the updates the bank requires. Sign the trustee sections and the authorization for the new account structure. Your sister has already reviewed everything. I did not pick up the pen, so I want to see the full withdrawal history for the last 24 months first. And I want to know why the co-trustee removal was dated to a week I was out of town. My older sister set her highlighter down. We already explained this. You said you were overwhelmed and wanted us to handle the details. You signed the amendment. If you had read it at the time, you would remember. I never signed it, I said. My voice stayed level. The date on that document is impossible. I have the conference records. My mother leaned back in her chair. Claire, this is exactly why we had to make the change. You turned every simple update into an argument. Your sister has been managing the property without constant questions. The bank needs signatures today. If we miss the window, it creates problems for everyone. I turned the top page over and pointed to a line item. This transfer of $42,000 last September is listed as roof repairs. The roof work I paid for out of my own account was completed in July. Where did that money actually go? My older sister's mouth tightened. You are not the only one who contributes. Some of us have carried more than our share for years. If you want to audit every line, we can spend the entire day here, but the bank deadline will not wait. My mother added, we kept you out of the heavier decisions because you have always struggled when things move quickly. That episode after your big project 2 years ago showed us you needed space. We were protecting you. I did not react to the reference. I had already noted it. 2 years earlier, I had finished a large federal grant application in 6 weeks and then slept for 30 hours straight. My mother had visited once during that time and had mentioned it to neighbors as evidence that I could not handle pressure. I had never corrected the story because it had not seemed worth the energy. I took the copies they offered and placed them in my folder without signing. I will review these and respond in writing within 7 days. I am not signing anything today. My older sister stood up. You are making this harder than it has to be. Mom has enough to manage without you turning every conversation into a deposition. My mother reached across the table and rested her hand on the recorder for a moment before pulling it back. We are a family. Families do not treat each other like opposing sides in a lawsuit. You have always been the one who needs everything explained twice. We were trying to spare you that. I stood as well. Send any further documents through Thomas Reed. I will not be returning here for additional meetings until I have complete records. I walked out without waiting for a reply. In the car, I turned the recorder off and drove down the hill without turning on the radio. Halfway to the main road, I stopped at the small market near the base of the neighborhood. Elena Vargas was outside loading groceries into her car. She was the neighbor I sometimes saw on weekend mornings when I came down for coffee. We had exchanged brief greetings for years, but had never had a real conversation. She looked up when I approached. For a second, she seemed uncertain whether to speak. Then she said, "Claire, I hope this is not overstepping. A couple of people from the upper villas mentioned that you had stepped back from the family property because things had become too much. They said your mother and sister were handling everything to give you space. I just wanted to make sure you were all right." I kept my hands on the strap of my bag. "I am fine. Thank you for telling me." She hesitated again. "If there is anything I can do." I know how these communities talk. Sometimes the story that spreads is not the one that actually happened. I nodded once. "I appreciate you saying something directly." She gave a small, careful smile and got into her car. I watched her drive away before I continued to my own townhouse. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table again with the new copies in the recorder. I played back the section from the middle of the meeting. My mother's voice came through clearly. "She'll sign eventually. She always does when we keep the pressure steady. We just have to present it as the only reasonable option." My older sister's reply followed a moment later. "As long as she does not drag Thomas into it again. He already asked too many questions the first time." I saved the file with a new label and added the timestamp. Then I opened the folder and placed the market conversation with Elena on a separate page. The community already had a version of events in which I had voluntarily withdrawn because I could not manage responsibility. My mother and my older sister had supplied that version. They had not needed to raise their voices or issue ultimatums. They had only needed to repeat it often enough in the right rooms. I closed the folder and looked at the recorder resting beside it. The plan had begun as a way to understand what had already been done without my knowledge. It was no longer only about understanding. The recordings and the documents now show a deliberate pattern of removal and replacement carried out while I was still writing checks and answering their calls. They had counted on my continued silence. I opened my laptop and drafted a formal request for the complete trust records addressed to the bank and copied to Thomas Reed. I did not mention the recorder. I did not mention the conversation at the market. I simply asked for everything that had been withheld. I scheduled it to send on Monday morning. Then I turned off the lights in the kitchen and sat in the dark for a long time. The house was quiet. No one called. No one knocked. The isolation they had described to the neighbors was beginning to match the reality inside my own walls. I had not chosen it. They had arranged it in advance, one quiet conversation at a time. I stayed at the table until the street outside grew completely dark. The recorder remained on the table where I had left it. I did not put it away. Saturday morning, I sent the formal records request to the bank and to Thomas Reed. By Monday afternoon, my mother had already called 3 times. I did not answer. On Tuesday, my older sister sent a text demanding I meet them at the villa again to clear the air. I replied with one sentence I would meet them at the small conference room at the base of the hills on Thursday at 10. Neutral ground. I would bring the recorder. They arrived 10 minutes late. My mother looked tired in a way I had not seen before. My older sister looked angry. I set the recorder on the table between us and turned it on before anyone spoke. I placed the folder with every document and the printed email from Thomas beside it. My mother started first. "This has gone far enough. You are turning a simple paperwork update into a family crisis. The bank is asking questions now because of your delay. I opened the folder to the page with my mother's handwritten note. This note says to remove me first because I would object. It is dated 3 weeks before the amendment you claimed I signed. I never signed it. You wrote this before you ever spoke to me about it. My older sister leaned forward. You are twisting everything. We were trying to protect the property and protect you. You have always made everything harder than it needed to be. I slid the printed email across the table. This is the message my mother sent to my older sister 2 days after that note. It says, we will tell her it was her idea once it is done. She will accept it if we frame it as reducing her stress. That is not protection. That is a plan. My mother's face changed. She looked at the paper but did not touch it. You were not well after that big project. Everyone could see it. We could not risk you making decisions that would affect the whole family when you could barely manage your own work. I kept my voice even. I finished the project on time and under budget. I slept for a day afterward. That is not the same as being unable to manage anything. You used one exhausted weekend to justify removing me from something my father put both our names on. My older sister's voice rose. You think you are the only one who did anything. I have been the one living there, dealing with the neighbors, handling the day-to-day. You wrote checks from a distance and acted like that made you in charge. I turned the recorder slightly so the microphone faced her more directly. You spent trust money on personal expenses and labeled them as villa improvements. You changed the locks without telling me. You told people in the community I had a breakdown and could not handle responsibility. That is not day-to-day management. That is removal. My mother finally spoke again, quieter this time. We did what we thought was necessary. The property needed decisions made quickly. You were never going to agree to sell or to restructure. We could not wait for you to be ready. I closed the folder. You did not wait because you had already decided I did not belong in the decision at all. The recording from our last meeting captured you saying I would sign eventually if you kept the pressure steady. You counted on me continuing to stay quiet. My older sister stood up. If you send any of this to the bank or to the association, you will destroy what is left of this family. Is that what you want? I stayed seated. I already sent the records request. I will send the rest of the evidence by the end of the week. What happens after that is not up to me. My mother looked at the recorder and then at me. You have changed. You used to understand that family comes before everything. Now you are willing to burn it all down over paperwork. I turned the recorder off and put it back in my bag. I understand now that the version of family you wanted did not include me unless I stayed silent and signed whatever was placed in front of me. I am done signing. I stood and walked out. Neither of them followed me to the door. That afternoon, I met Thomas Reed at his office. I gave him copies of everything, including the recordings. He reviewed them without speaking for several minutes. Then he said the bank would almost certainly require an audit once they saw the pattern of withdrawals and the conflicting trustee documents. He also said the Villa Association had rules about misuse of shared maintenance funds. If the board received the same evidence, my mother and my older sister could face demands to repay the misused amounts and could lose any remaining authority over the property. I asked him to handle the formal submission on my behalf. I signed the papers that removed my name from the trust entirely. I did not want any part of it anymore. Thomas did not try to talk me out of it. He simply filed the documents and told me he would keep me updated on the audit results. Over the next 2 weeks, the consequences arrived in pieces. The bank froze the accounts pending review. The Villa Association Board sent a formal inquiry to my mother and my older sister asking for explanations of the withdrawals. Neighbors who had once accepted the story that I had stepped back for my health began to ask different questions. Elena Vargas texted me once to say the tone in the upper villas had shifted. People were now saying my mother and my older sister had taken advantage and that the family had always been difficult. I did not reply beyond a short thank you. My mother called one last time. She did not apologize. She said the stress was affecting her health and that I was making everything worse by refusing to compromise. I told her I would not be taking any more calls. She hung up without saying goodbye. My older sister sent one final text. You always have to be the victim. Congratulations, you won. I did not answer. I blocked both numbers. 3 weeks later, I gave notice on my townhouse. I had already accepted a remote grant writing position with an organization based in another state. The pay was steady. The work was the same kind I had always done. I packed the few things I cared about and left the rest. On the last morning, I drove past the base of the hills one more time. I did not stop. I did not look up toward the villa. I kept driving until the road straightened and the hills were behind me. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel grief in any way that required comfort. What I felt was the absence of a weight I had carried for years without naming it. The people who shared my father's memory had decided that memory did not require my presence. They had rewritten the record, spent the money, and told the neighborhood I was the problem. When I stopped agreeing to that version, they had nothing left to offer except pressure and accusation. I chose the version that matched the documents and the recordings. That choice cost me the last remaining connection to the only family I had. It also ended the quiet requirement that I keep accepting less than the truth in exchange for being allowed to stay. Some people spend their whole lives trying to earn a permanent place inside a story that was never written with them in it. I stopped trying. The cost was real. So was the relief. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to choose between keeping a broken version of family or keeping the truth, I hope you already know which one lets you sleep at night. If this story stayed with you, I would like to hear what you would have done when the first envelope appeared. Drop your thoughts in the comments.